Welcome into the 10-11 Now Alert Center. I'm Danielle Shank. Thanks so much for joining me for this Nebraska versus Iowa pregame show. Two familiar foes meet in an unfamiliar place, Houston, for the third time this season, but this time a trip to the Elite Eight is on the line. Earlier, we streamed the Huskers' packed hotel lobby as they departed for the Toyota Center. And now 10-11 and our sister station WWT are teaming up with Iowa affiliates for coverage leading into this matchup. First, here's our very own Kevin Suits with KTIV's Jason Moeller on just how unexpected and how big this rivalry moment is on the NCAA tournament stage.
It's Nebraska versus Iowa in the NCAA Tournament Sweet 16. With Jason Moeller, I'm Kevin Suits. Jason, holy cow, you get the rivalry game and the big dance. Nobody expected this when the bracket was first released.
Yeah, who'd have thought we'd both be here, Kevin, right? I mean, this is a great experience, and tell you what, there couldn't be a better rivalry to have down here than this Husker-Hawkeye rivalry. I grew up in Iowa. You've been in Nebraska plenty. You know there's nothing quite like this rivalry matchup, and it almost kind of has a feeling, I kind of said this last night, it's like running into an old classmate from high school, not anywhere near your school. You're just kind of sitting here like, wow, you guys are here too. First time for Iowa since '99, first time for the Huskers ever. I mean, what's it been like? What's it like for you to see this rivalry down here, man?
It's pretty wild, and there's no love lost between the fan bases, right? They've had so much fun interacting with each other. Is fun the right word?
I think it's fun. It's good.
Sure.
I think it's good-hearted in nature. But
there's some choice words exchanged every now and again.
Choice words exchanged. I've been doing man on the streets down here ever since we got down here. Tell you what, we've had to make a couple of edits to some of those questions because of some of those choice words.
So the fans are really having fun with this. As for the players, they're trying not to get too wrapped up in the rivalry element of this ballgame because this is the biggest game. They always say that, right? But it is because they're playing in the NCAA tournament. But there's no denying that when Nebraska players see the black and yellow and the Iowa players see the Nebraska in, even one of the Iowa players told me in the locker room yesterday, it sends a shiver up his spine. He does not like Nebraska. He grew up in Iowa City. So there is an element there, and it just intensifies everything that's involved with this ball game.
Yeah, it raises everything up to just that extra level, right? That familiarity with people. And not only that, because there's multiple elements to this rivalry. Not only do you have the Nebraska rivalry in here, you've got an Iowa State connection at Nebraska in Fred Hoiberg in that rivalry. So the Hawkeye fans, they've never really liked Freddie, even when he was at Ames. Now he's in Nebraska. Always just raises it up just a little bit more, but that also just makes it that much more fun for everyone else around this matchup.
Absolutely. This will be the 45th all-time meeting between Nebraska and Iowa. Of course, they play regularly now with both schools in the Big Ten Conference. If you look at this from a basketball perspective, Jason, they split during the regular season. Iowa won in Iowa City. Nebraska won in Lincoln. Here comes the rubber match with the highest of stakes. Since we're talking about the way these two teams and schools are intertwined, they have history on the football field. They have history in baseball and wrestling. We can keep on going down the line. Is it safe to say basketball is where the biggest game between these schools has ever existed, and it's going to happen here in Houston?
That might be the case. I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility to say that. I mean, this is definitely the biggest game in Nebraska's men's basketball program's history. It's for sure the biggest game for Iowa since at least my lifetime, Kevin. I know last time was 1999 they made it to this point, right? So it could rank in that high point. I don't know if there's ever been a bowl game between Iowa and Nebraska in the past. I don't think the baseball teams have ever met up in the NCAA tournament. So I would say I don't think you're far off. This could be the biggest game in this rivalry's history.
A lot at stake and a huge, huge stage. Let's talk real quickly about this matchup. I know one thing that you're focused on is the pace of play. Iowa really likes to slow it down. They play games in the 50s, low 60s. Nebraska can play that way and win that way. However, the Huskers really like to play with a little bit more pace and shoot the three.
Yeah, that's the thing. And here's the thing. Although I was playing a slower pace of play, and Ben McCollum's been doing this ever since he was at Northwest Missouri State, he plays to what his team is capable of or what he thinks they're capable of. He likes that slow pace of play with this team, but that's the thing. Just because it's slow doesn't mean they aren't moving around there. Hawkeyes move the ball really well. They're just very comfortable late in the shot clock. And with that Husker team, yeah, they do like to play a little more fast-paced. A little difference between Freddie's team at Nebraska this year and Freddie's teams at Iowa State in the past. A little bit more defense on this Husker team, so I think they'll be able to hang with that Hawkeye offense. That's going to be the key. If the Huskers can kind of stay I don't want to say keep their legs underneath them. That's going to be a key, because when you get into those long defensive possessions late in the game, that's when you start finding out who's got a little more gas left in the tank.
You said late in the shot clock. I know for folks that watch Nebraska, sometimes that's frustrating. They want to see the Huskers get the ball down the court and let Price do his thing and let Jamarcus Lawrence shoot the three and let Sam Hoiberg get some open looks. So there's a contrast of styles, but the one common thread is defense. This is going to be an epic night in terms of Iowa basketball and Nebraska basketball. And who knows? They may deliver the game of the tournament. It is March Madness, and both these schools have had quite the ride to get here to Houston.
Yeah, I tell you what, quite the ride. And you already mentioned could be the game of March Madness. Both these schools already have nominees for the game of March Madness. Yeah. Iowa taking down Florida. Nebraska, man, tell you what, that basketball was about that far down that hoop for Vanderbilt.
Everybody in the building thought it was going in.
I think everyone in America who was watching thought that was going in, but it didn't. They've already had two great games. I think we're going to be in for another great one tonight.
It's a 6:30 tip-off down at Houston at the Toyota Center. With Jason Mueller, I'm Kevin Suits.
Thank you, Kevin and Jason. The stage is set. A rivalry that usually lives in the Midwest is now dropped down into Houston. With history, pride, and plenty of noise in the stands, one of the biggest storylines, though, is Price Sanford, now at Nebraska, facing his former team. Here is WWT's Clayton Collier and KCRG's Colin Davies with a breakdown on Sanford, plus the regular season split and how both teams got here.
Hey everybody, I'm Clayton Collier at First Alert 6 in Omaha.
And I'm Colin Davies from KCRG in Cedar Rapids, and we're here in Houston.
We are. It is hot, but the rivalry even hotter right now, and right at the epicenter of that is former Iowa Hawkeye and current Nebraska Husker, Price Sanford.
Yeah, and he's coming into this one with a little bit of extra motivation because of that history that he does have with Iowa. Of course, he came back, he went to Nebraska, he transferred out of Iowa because of that relationship that he had with Fred Hoiberg.
He did. Went all the way back to Iowa State. There's pictures of him, and his brother Peyton, going to his camps with the Cyclones. So long history there, and it couldn't have worked out better for him. I mean, 123 made threes this year. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the country. If you're looking at it logically, you understand the move. But when you have a heated rivalry game with a Sweet 16, you're going to find any reason to hate on a guy, and you have it there for Hawkeye fans.
Yeah, I think about half the arena will be booing him every time he gets the ball, probably the same treatment he got in Iowa City, and then the other half will be cheering him anytime he gets the ball. And you mentioned that, talked about that relationship with Fred Hoiberg. Now, he grew up a big Iowa State basketball fan. He was a Nebraska fan, I believe, for football, but when it came to basketball, he was an Iowa State fan. So he's got the two rivals that he grew up rooting for, Iowa State for Iowa, and then, of course, now he grew up rooting for Nebraska football. A little bit of both sides of the coin there.
Yeah, pretty removed, about as removed as you can be from a Nebraska-Iowa rivalry growing up in the state in terms of fandom as a kid. But, on the court, it was interesting. The Hawkeyes held him decently in check out in Iowa City in that win. He had 13 points, 3 of 7 from the field. Did a little bit better in the overtime win. I think he had 15 there. But, man, he has been on fire so far in the NCAA tournament. Combined 38 points. He obviously had the 23, the 7 made threes in the Huskers' first ever NCAA tournament win over Troy. Fouled that up as well with a 15-point performance, another 3 triples. So he's seeing the ball really well right now for the Huskers. A lot of their players seem to be peaking at the right time. So it's really interesting when you have two not only a heated game, but 2 regular season matchups where it really could have gone either way. And it ended up with them splitting at home. You had Hawkeye fans storming the court for the first unranked loss for the Huskers, and then Nebraska gets them back with a thrilling overtime senior day win.
And what an overtime game that was, by the way. At the end of I think that was the last game of the regular season for at least the Hawkeyes. And when we look at Price Sanford in this game, it maybe means a little bit more to him. He's trying to treat it like every other game. We spoke to him yesterday. But for the Iowa team, Ben McCollum said after the Iowa game, saying, Price is always welcome back in Iowa City. They really support him and understand the move. Of course, they had the coaching change from Fran McCaffrey to Ben McCollum. And I asked, Price about his fandom growing up and what that was like. He said, yeah, he's like, I knew about this rivalry when he went to a Nebraska-Iowa football game as a kid, and he realized then how big of a rivalry this is. But now we talk about this familiarity, right? This is the 3rd time that these two teams have played each other. And now Sanford and a lot of these guys on both these teams are going to be comfortable with this. While the fans, this may be the peak of the rivalry, for the players, it kind of prevents almost a calming sense. I spoke to Cale Combs for Iowa, and he was saying, if you're playing an out-of-conference opponent in the tournament, it kind of brings a little bit more unfamiliarity. You're a little bit more nervous. But this is the third time that these teams have played each other this year. So he said it's kind of a calming presence, just kind of, at least preparation-wise, before they get into the arena. It just feels like another Big Ten game.
To an extent, yeah, in terms of preparation leading up to it, it is still the Sweet 16, so that these guys know, like, hey, look, it's an Elite Eight bid on the line. But, the Huskers said it too, that this is a lot easier in terms of preparation. You already know the team. They're able to go into maybe a little more detail than they otherwise would have, looking at maybe small wrinkles that Iowa's added over the last few weeks since senior day. But, I mean, both of these teams are coming off of historic, incredible wins. I mean, the Nebraska-Vanderbilt game that we were at in OKC last weekend, Nebraska started on an 8-0 run. I think that was the biggest run of that game. It was just back and forth. You see points where games go shot for shot and it gets really exciting. That was that game from start to finish. I'm not exaggerating. It was just constant. And then Vanderbilt was starting to get the momentum, but the Husker crowd was really what was lifting them up and keeping them in it throughout. That really just shortened the game into possession by possession for them for a full 40 minutes. I'm interested to see, Colin, here what happens here in Houston, because it was easy for Husker fans to overtake OKC. It was a 6-hour drive away, where this time around you have Iowa fans that will travel, and the elephant in the room here is we're here in Houston, where the Houston Cougars also happen to be here. They get to be here because Rice is the home institution.
Yes, and that's right. With Houston fans especially, when you buy these tickets, you get both games, right? So, these Houston fans, it's going to be fans from all four teams in this arena. So it's going to be a pretty interesting dynamic. And you mentioned how Nebraska had a heck of a game to get here. The same was the deal for Iowa when they were taking on Florida. I mean, Iowa was leading for a lot of that game, but it just felt like, all right, this is defending national champs, #1 seed. It's just setting up for, a collapse down the stretch, because Iowa throughout the year had lost all these close games. And we had heard Ben McCollum say throughout the year, we're so close time after time again to getting that kind of statement win. And it culminated against Michigan. They had that really close loss to Michigan at home. And then finally in the NCAA tournament, they've kind of leaned forward and just kind of done their thing. And so when Alvaro Fulgueras hit that shot, that was an unbelievable shot. And he said, afterwards in the post-game interview, that March is for dreamers and this team is dreaming. And I asked him about that yesterday, and he was saying that, this team, sometimes the reality is even better than the dream. And he said that's been the case because you look back at this Iowa team. There's Ben McCollum, 2 years ago, he's coaching Division II. Bennett Sturts, 2 years ago, playing Division II. Tavion Banks, just a couple years ago, was at a JUCO. A lot of their best players have come from, I like to call it as long-term Cinderella in a certain case, and that's what they're here for. So they didn't dream years ago that they would be able to do this. It's just kind of, we just don't associate this Iowa team with Cinderella because they've hit every benchmark so fast and they've hit it easily so far in year one under Ben McCollum. But that's kind of the feel that this game has. It's maybe two programs that long-term wise, people didn't expect them to be here.
Maybe not at least this quickly. Nebraska coming off of the Crown tournament win as well. Fred Hoiberg's talked about how valuable that was for them, just going through the process of winning 4 games in a short period of time. So they kind of came in with some expectation, some momentum from that. But of course, year one of a new coach, you don't expect them to be here knocking off the defending national champs in the round of 32. I've managed to be home for about 30 hours from OKC to out here in Houston. And when my wife and I were watching that game at home, and we were losing our minds watching, Alvaro Fulgueras, hit that 3. I mean, for both of these teams to get here to a rivalry game in the Sweet 16 after both hitting game winners in the final seconds. I mean, you can't write it any better than this. And here we are, 2 Midwest teams getting ready to square off here in Houston. I think Bennett Sturts said they should have moved this thing to either Omaha or to Des Moines for a midway point. That would have been easier on us, right?
Yes, a lot easier. But yeah, it was actually kind of funny. I spoke to Alvaro just the other day, and so when I flew in, we come through the airport, and me and another beat writer, we're actually sitting on the plane next to each other. We're getting our bags, and all of a sudden, Alvaro Folgueras' brother, Nacho, comes down, and he looks just like Alvaro. He plays pro over in Ireland. He's 6'10". You can't miss him. I spoke to him just a few months ago, or I think about a month ago or something like that. And when he came to Alvaro's game, it was the first time he'd been there, Alvaro had a career high. And so he's going to be here again. Alvaro's mom's not going to be here. And of course, when Alvaro's mom came from Spain to get here, he hit that shot against Florida. Right. So maybe family is the key for Alvaro, and now he's got his brother here. So maybe look out for another good game from him.
Yeah, he's a great soundbite, by the way. We just asked him about the rivalry. He said it's wild. He said it belongs there up against like some of the best soccer rivalries in Europe, says some of the best in the world. So just talking to him briefly yesterday, he was an entertaining soundbite for sure.
He's the number one guy on this team for an interview. If you want to go get some fire, you go find Alvaro Folgueras.
Well, there'll be plenty of fire tonight in this rivalry game between Nebraska and Iowa. Last I saw Nebraska, 3.5-point favorite. Throw that out the window for a rivalry game.
Yeah, these teams know each other too well. Ben McCollum said yesterday also that I think we look into the chess match a little bit too much, and he said that's just going to be about whoever plays better. It's not going to be, he's going to stay up, and I'm sure Fred Hoiberg's stay up till 4 a.m., got 2 hours of sleep, just watching some film. But I think the film, just toss it out the window. It's going to be whichever team is able to shoot hotter. When it comes to March, that just seems to be what it is.
The ball gets tipped at 6:30 p.m. Thank you for watching. For Colin, I'm Clayton. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Clayton and Colin. And one more Sanford note. He enters tonight needing just 26 points to reach 1,000 for his career, so it would be pretty sweet if he did it against his old team tonight. Now, beyond the storylines, this one may come down to execution. These teams know each other very well. There's no mystery left in the scouting report now. It's all about those details, the possessions, turnovers, rebounding, and late-game composure. It has all the makings of a defensive slugfest, with Nebraska and Iowa ranking 1 and 2 in the Big Ten in scoring defense. So now here's WWT's Mason Kern with KWQC's Joey Danya on the emotion of this friends versus foe at this stage and why defense and pressure could set the tone early.
Well, here in Houston, I'm Mason Kern with First Alert 6 in Omaha.
And I'm Joey Danya, the sports director from KWQC TV in Davenport, Iowa.
A lot going on ahead of the Sweet 16. Iowa and Nebraska set for a historic rivalry showdown in a stage they've never met before on a neutral floor. What have been some of the vibes from the Iowa locker room ahead of this Sweet 16?
Well, yeah, the Hawkeyes, you would think they're just on cloud 9 after pulling off the biggest upset of the tournament thus far, taking down the defending national champion Florida in the last round. But they're right back to business. The celebration was short-lived. Ben McCollum told his team right after the game, we're going to celebrate this for a few minutes, and then it's on to the next game, and that next game is going to be Nebraska here tonight.
Yeah, similar vibes from Nebraska, really trying to downplay the rivalry, although sometimes you see a little bit of that vitriol maybe peek out. Neither of these teams like each other very much. This game, though, going to be very defensive-minded. Both of these teams, the top 2 in scoring defense allowed in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and they're among the very best in the nation in terms of defensive efficiency. That's both where these teams just live and die, is with their defense. Iowa is going to give you 40 minutes of relentless, intense ball pressure and physicality. They're going to get their hands up in the passing lanes. They thrive off turnovers, much like Nebraska does as well.
Yeah, and the margins in this game are very slim. Nebraska allows teams to score just 65.8 points per game against them. That's first in the Big Ten. Iowa right behind at 66. So we asked Nebraska players how they deal with the pressure when the margin for error is so slim, and the answer is really just play our game, execute the game plan. I'm sure Iowa had expressed a similar sentiment.
Yeah, exactly. They're just going to do what they do, and they know exactly what Nebraska is going to do as well. They've already played twice, of course, the home team winning each time, and that makes things very interesting because they know exactly what to expect. But when that's the case, sometimes that's a little harder to prepare for. It comes down to just the little details, and whoever does those better will probably come out on top in this one.
Yeah, Iowa out-rebounding Nebraska in that first matchup. Only 57 points winning Iowa the game in that one, a true rock fight, as they say. They're expecting maybe a little more offensive output in this one, at least on Nebraska's side. Both teams are going to make their adjustments and change things up. It took overtime, obviously, in Lincoln for Nebraska to pull out a win. What did Iowa's players say just about how the overtime loss in Lincoln kind of fueled them for the Sweet 16?
Well, I think that's something that they haven't forgotten, of course. They had such a great comeback just to get that game to overtime. That's something that they can use here as they take on Nebraska for a third time. They were kind of down and dead in the water, but they found a way to get back, and it wasn't for Bennett Sturtz, Iowa's star player, other guys really got involved, started hitting threes. Cooper Koch has been on fire for the Hawkeyes. If he can really extend the floor and start draining threes the way he has been as of late, that could be Iowa's best path to victory here tonight.
Cale Jacobson, a huge factor in Nebraska's win in Lincoln, and Nebraska held Iowa to 1 of 9, I believe, in the overtime period. So finishing down the stretch under pressure, stakes couldn't be higher here at the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to seeing how this one plays out tonight. Nebraska plays that no-middle defense.
Right.
What have the Huskers been saying about how they're going to contain Iowa? Because Iowa, obviously, they thrive on defense, but they've got a lot of guys who can put up the points as well.
Yeah, they learned a lot from both of these matchups. I mean, both of these teams saying they made adjustments, but the other team also made adjustments and attacked their weaknesses. Nebraska did flip to a 1-3-1 zone against Vanderbilt late when Vanderbilt got things going in the round of 32. That seemed to be a little disruptive. So Nate Lenzer has kind of led the defensive charge from the assistant bench next to Fred Hoiberg. You never know what things they've kind of tweaked and set up, but Nebraska knows they execute the game plan that's in front of them. They expect to handle Iowa in the Sweet 16.
And what's kind of been the mindset from the Huskers inside of that locker room? Because obviously this is a program that's never been here to the Sweet 16 before. You could see it becoming easy to become complacent.
Yeah, they have all year expressed their maturity. They're a very old team, save for maybe Braden Frager, redshirt freshman, who's obviously shined in really big moments, won them the game at Vanderbilt. But beyond him, I mean, really they're an older team. They flushed emotional wins, they flushed emotional losses. Even against Iowa, they kind of responded from that first loss, 57-52 in Iowa City, and came right back. Now, at the end of the season, 6-6 finish, they were able to get into the NCAA tournament and win their first game, get the monkey off their back against Troy, and now they're just rolling into the Sweet 16.
Yeah, Iowa and Nebraska similar in the ways that they didn't finish the regular season playing their best basketball. Iowa really kind of limped into the NCAA tournament, losing 7 of their final 10, I believe it was. But this just goes to show you, once you get to March, anything can happen.
That's
yeah,
right.
That's what makes this NCAA tournament so riveting.
Really cool. Obviously, you mentioned the upset of the tournament, Iowa maybe not expecting to be here. How do they kind of process flushing a huge win like that and moving on to a really emotional rivalry game?
Well, I think for the Iowa fans, they really feel all the gravity of, we haven't been to the Sweet 16 since 1999. But for a lot of these players, some of them didn't grow up around Iowa. They're not as familiar with the history of this program. All of Iowa's roster outside of Cooper Koch, they weren't here last year and for the years prior to that. So this is just kind of where this team expected to be. We talked to Bennett Sturtz in the locker room yesterday, and he was asked, did you think this was possible? He thought this was possible last year when he was at Drake. He said, I thought we should have and could have beaten Texas Tech. So this is exactly where the Hawkeyes expect to be, and they're not content yet. They want to keep this great run going as long as possible.
That's the same expressed content from Nebraska. Obviously 0-8 at the NCAA tournament before they got here. Now that they've got that first win, they're looking to lead with their defense, get past Iowa. These teams very familiar with one another ahead of the third matchup.
Yeah, no doubt. It's always hard to play a team 3 times. Both teams obviously winning at home. Those games were both right down to the wire. It comes down to just a few possessions here or there. Free throws could also be really big tonight.
Rebounding margin very big in Iowa. 19 turnovers in their loss in Lincoln. They're trying to obviously maybe clean up some of that to get a win here today.
Yeah, whenever Iowa has struggled, it's when they struggle in the turnover game and also when they struggle to force turnovers. Iowa and Nebraska both are going to be trying to get as many turnovers as possible tonight. For Iowa, imagine if I was sitting here just smacking at your mic the whole time we were doing this. That's how they're going to make it.
You away.
Yeah, they're going to have their hands in those passing lanes all night and try and get as many turnovers as possible.
Nebraska experienced with that with Tyler Tanner and Vanderbilt and Duke Miles. Some relentless guard play, another great guard matchup, and some really great defense on tap.
Yeah, and 2 great coaches leading the way, and Ben McCollum and Fred Hoiberg.
That's right.
So that's where it all starts, at the very top for these programs.
We'll have all your coverage from Houston at the Sweet 16 and beyond for one of these programs. But for now, reporting alongside Joey Danya, I'm Mason Kern.
Thank you, Mason and Joey, 2 teams that know each other very well on a stage they've never shared before. Nebraska is chasing its first ever Elite 8 appearance, while Iowa looks to keep a season-defining run alive. Now, this March Madness is also proving to be quite profitable for some Nebraska bars. That includes here at home, as the Rail Yard is expected to be packed with Husker fans watching on the big screen. And if you saw our live shot at 5, it's definitely going to be a packed one down there tonight.
I think it's going to be a pretty electric environment for fans to come down and watch in the Rail Yard. In the back of our head, we're expecting this to be kind of like a high volume country show at the arena.
And in Omaha, Rocco's Pizza, across from the downtown ballpark, is bringing back its viral College World Series Jell-O Shot Challenge with a twist. They're calling it the Battle of the Better Corn, tracking Nebraska versus Iowa fans on game day.
That's the deal, is that everyone always says, what would happen if Nebraska would get here? Would they beat the LSU record? Would they not? And it's like, well, you never know until you can write their name up there. And we decided it'd be a pretty good time to write their name up there.
Now, for every $5 shot sold, Rocco's will donate $2 to Western Nebraska wildfire relief. And over the years, the challenge has raised more than $500,000 for charity. But what about the bars in Houston? Oklahoma City learned the hard way last week that some bars actually ran out of beer before the night was over. But meanwhile, Tom's Watch Bar in Houston isn't taking any chances. Busch Light, a favorite for both Nebraska and Iowa fans, made a special delivery ahead of tonight's game. The Busch Light mascot, as you see him there in that plaid, was even spotted unloading cases straight from the truck for fans to enjoy. Now, as we know, Nebraska fans travel well, and today looks to be no different. So will Houston feel like a neutral site? Not if Husker fans have a say. Our Brandon Muting caught up with fans ahead of tip-off as they were around town.
Nebraska Red has officially taken over the city of Houston. The Huskers are about to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes in the Sweet 16 in the Toyota Center for a spot in the Elite Eight. As you can tell behind me, Nebraska fans have taken over Tom's Watch Bar. I got the chance to speak to a few of them earlier this afternoon, and this is what they had to say.
Go Big Red! Go Big Red! We drove all night last night. I think we left about 6, 7, somewhere in there. And yeah, I'm just fired up.
We were sitting around after the game the other night, and he's like, Dad, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity potentially. So, we had to book it and get down here.
And this is just another example of how we support our university and our kids. So I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Thank you to Fred Hoiberg and this team. My gosh, you've given us a reason to cheer every single game this year. You never let down.
We can do this. Beat Iowa.
We better win, or I'm probably going to puke when it's all over.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red! Remember, it's a go big or go home game. We'll provide updates throughout the day as the game goes on. Reporting in Houston, Brandon Muting. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Brandon. Hopefully there will be no puking and things go well for the Big Red. That's all the time we have, as tip-off is just moments away on TBS and True TV. So thanks so much for joining me, and go Big Red.